Hi everyone, Jamie Humphries here for Six String Alliance, and today we have a quick riff. Yes, we are taking a look at Run to You by Bryan Adams. So I've just taken part in a video over on Produce Like a Pro with my good friend Warren Hewitt. And yes, as usual, we felt that this would be a suitable lesson for my quick riff series here on Six String Alliance. Now, Run to You is taken from the 1984 Bryan Adams album Reckless, and it is without a doubt one of those era-defining tracks. It is an outstanding track. It features that iconic guitar riff and that absolutely perfect yet simple guitar solo. Like many people of my age, Bryan Adams is kind of the soundtrack to my teenage years. Even now I'm chuckling to myself as I think about this. When I was 16 years old, a buddy of mine was a couple of years older than me, still my friend now, my friend Matt Farrington. I'm going to name and shame him here on my, not shame him actually, that's just a joke, but I'm going to name him here on my video today. He was a couple of years older than me, so he passed his test, and we all used to go hanging out wearing our Don Johnson style Miami Vice jackets, cruising around our hometown in his old Cortina 1600E, listening to Bryan Adams with your arm out the window, Fender Strat in the back seat. We were living the dream. So I have got massive fond memories. Sorry for chuckling away, but it does make me smile when I hear these songs. Plus, how many of you can say that you haven't played in a covers band and played a Bryan Adams song? They're incredibly popular guitar songs for you to learn. Now, this song features both Bryan Adams and his long-standing session guitar sideman Keith Scott on guitar. And Keith, for me, is a little bit of an unsung hero. Some of his guitar playing on these Bryan Adams classic tracks it's just beautiful. He's one of those guitar players who definitely knows when to play and when not to play. You know, they're just such perfectly crafted guitar parts. So before we get into the lesson, let's talk a little bit about tone. Now, I have seen Bryan Adams in concert back in, I think it was 1990, I went to see him play. I wish I'd seen him in that sort of late 80s period, mid to late 80s period. I would have loved to have seen him then. I saw him when it started getting a little bit too cheesy for me, but I went and saw him when Extreme were opening for him. I think that was the main reason I went, but all the same, he still played an incredible set. So for guitars, I would pretty much safely say that this track was recorded using Fender Strats, and Keith Scott favours Marshall and Fender amps. I read that during this session, it was mainly Marshall amps that he was playing, although they did use some Fender amps. It was a Marshall amp with just a single 57 on it. And Bryan Adams himself has used Marshall amps, but mainly favours Vox amps. Now, I think it's fairly safe to say that it was a Fender Strat on this recording, although depending on what era of live recording you watch, they tend to mix the guitars up a little bit. You know, sometimes you see them playing Gretches, sometimes there's a Strat and an SG, but I think the sound of this track is that classic Strat sound. So for the tone for this lesson and that little abbreviated performance that you heard and saw at the start of this video, I've used my Music Man Cutlass. I did once own a Strat and I stupidly sold it. I don't know why I sold it. I've always kind of favoured single cuts. I always played Telecasters before I played Music Man, and obviously most of my videos you see me playing an Axis, which is kind of Les Paul, more telly than Les Paul, but it is that kind of classic single cut design. But that's kind of just reaffirmed why now I never sell a guitar, because I really do regret selling the particular Strat that I had. But I have a Music Man Cutlass, and this is probably the finest non-Strat style guitar that you can play. So I'm using my Cutlass today, and I've chosen to not use a guitar amp, and there is a reason for this. I'm using IK Multimedia's Amplitude 5, and when Warren asked me to put this little lesson together for both Produce Like a Pro and for Six String Alliance, when he suggested it for Six String Alliance, I suddenly thought, hang on a minute, I think I programmed those tones for IK. Yes, I do a lot of work in the background for IK Multimedia. I programmed all of the tones on Brian May Amplitude for both Amplitude 5 and Amplitude 4, and also for the iPad version as well. I've also done a lot of the presets on the Amplitude 5 version of the Slash package, plus a lot of presets that come with Amplitude 5. And also more recently, I programmed 200 presets. Yes, that was a mission. I programmed 200 presets for IK Multimedia's ToneNet tone sharing website and community. So if you see any of the IK presets have the little IK logo, a lot of those are mine. I know they had some other guys programming. I don't know how many other guys were involved, but like I said, I did 200, and I did both of the Run to You presets. I did the rhythm guitar preset and I did the lead guitar preset. So if you are an IK Multimedia user, head on over to the ToneNet or register on ToneNet. I know you can click on a button on Amplitude 5 and you can get this tone. Now, for those of you that don't have Amplitude 5 and don't use that software, if you're using another, maybe an effects processor or another platform, whatever you're using, for the clean guitar, I've used a Vox style amp for that, but I've got it with a compressor in front just so that the amp is starting to drive. It's that slightly clean, pushed guitar tone. And I've also then split the signal and I've got a clean DI on it, just to add a little bit of that sort of doubling effect, and then obviously a nice wide chorus. For the lead guitar tone, I'm using a Marshall style model where I can't remember what overdrive I'm using. I've got an overdrive. I think it's like a Boss style distortion or overdrive pedal in front of it. I think it's the overdrive, Boss overdrive model in front, because I know that Keith Scott uses Boss pedals in his live rig. I believe that they were using those Peter Cornish rigs, but there is actually a video on YouTube with Keith talking about his Boss pedals and his rig. So I'm using the Marshall with the Boss style pedal in front, plus a sumptuous amount of reverb and delay to give it that nice atmospheric sound, and it kind of sits back in the mix a little bit as well. Okay, so now let's take a look at the riffs. First of all, you will notice for all the rhythm guitar parts, I am using a capo at the 2nd fret. And normally I would call these chords out in their sort of open chords, but due to some of the other chords that we're going to be playing, I will be calling the chord names out in the new position. Now, the main riff is one of those those riffs that I think everybody should know. It's just instantly recognizable. It is an iconic guitar riff, and it's based around a really simple chord arpeggio figure that uses 3 chords only on the bottom 3 strings. One of the things I love about this riff as well is the fact that it uses a common and shared tone throughout. So we got the capo at the 2nd fret. We're going to play an F sharp minor 7th chord. So that open D string, effectively an open D, but it's the note of E, is the minor 7th of the F sharp minor. You're then going to place your 2nd finger on the low E at the 5th fret to form an A chord. And that E note, the open string, is the 5th of that chord. And then you're going to move that shape up a whole tone, and you're going to be playing a B major chord. But with that E note, we are now playing a B major with an add 4. I really love the sound of that chord because you've got slight dissonance there between the major 3rd, which is D sharp, and that 4th, which is E. They're only a semitone apart, but it's just a really beautiful sound. So now let's talk about the rhythm of this part. We are playing a constant 8th note driving chord arpeggio. So when you play the F sharp minor 7th, okay, you're arpeggiating across. E string, A string, D string. Then we play the E string, A string, D string again. And then back to the A and back to the E. So, okay, then we put our 2nd finger down on the 5th fret of the low E string, and we just arpeggiate E, A, and D string. And then we move up a whole tone to our B major add 4, and we play the original pattern. So put that together. It's just such a simple part, but just sounds so fantastic. It's up to you whether you want to experiment a little bit with the picking, maybe play the last note as an up pick. But for me, that feels a little bit awkward. You could also alternate pick it. But again, I think it loses a little bit of the drive. You know, with those downstrokes, it's really pushing the rhythm. Yeah, I'd stick with downstrokes. I think that's the best option. But again, you know, there's no rules here. It's up to you. So experiment with whatever picking combination you feel comfortable with. Okay, so following on from the verse, we now have the pre-chorus. Now, this section here led me to do a little bit of extra research. I should actually point out that I've done... I did a Bryan Adams DVD for Lick Library, and I actually wrote a Bryan Adams transcription book, an old jam with Bryan Adams transcription book for total accuracy. But I've got a collection, all my DVDs and books on the wall here in my live room, but for some reason I can't find that book. I must have lent it to someone, so hopefully I can locate a new copy of it. I think they're all out of print now. But I was sort of thinking, trying to remember how I taught it. But I think that there was a couple of things about that I maybe played in what I felt was the obvious position, and probably wasn't the best position. Obviously, a lot of those things were transcribed back in the mid-late 90s, so this was really before YouTube. Anyway, I did a lot of exploration, and it's really dependent on what sort of period you watch the band play. Sometimes they play different chord shapes. I even saw a video of Bryan playing it without a capo, so obviously the whole guitar was tuned up by a whole tone. But I found a few videos where he was quite consistent between each video. One is an early video. I always, you know, if an album comes out in the 80s, I always tend to try to find live performance from that period, because I think it's more than likely that the person who's recorded that track is going to play it a lot closer to how they recorded it back then. Obviously, as time passes, the chord shapes get adapted and things change. So watching some videos, you can see that Bryan is playing the D chord as an A double bar shape. So we have... And on the recording, you clearly hear that chord sliding up as well. So I think, you know, it's safe to say that it was played in this position. I have seen videos where the C shape is being used. And also there's obviously some double tracking going on the original. So, you know, that chord voicing could have been blended in also. But I'm just going by what I've seen in live recordings and what makes more sense to, for me when you hear the most dominant of the guitars in the recording. So you're going from the D major and then sliding up and continuing the rhythm in the E major. So the pre-chorus section has also modulated. Now, when we've started out the verse, you're playing F sharp minor to an A major to a B major add 4, but effectively a B major. Now, when I look at that, I see those two chords, major chords, a whole tone apart. So that's chord 4, that's chord 5. So A is chord 4, B is chord 5. F sharp minor is chord 2, so we're very much in the key of E major. But at this point, we then modulate. Instead of treating E major as our 1 chord, we're going to treat it as a 5 chord, which enables us to introduce that D major chord. Okay, now this is the chord that caused me a little bit of a problem here, because watching him play it live and listening to it first of all on the original, it's a little bit hard to really decipher what's going on. But watching him play it live, what he does is he brings his second finger over to play the root note on C sharp. The E major chord is very closely related to C sharp minor. They are relative major and minor. And if you play an E major triad, but put C sharp in the bass, then you get a C sharp minor 7th chord. And at that point there, we are adding our little finger to raise the 5th. So it's like a sharp. So it's effectively like an E sus4, but it has the C sharp in the bass. Now, at that point, that E major chord is a pivotal chord. So, in other words, it's now helping us jump back into the home key for the chorus. So, like I said, that D major is a non-diatonic chord. It's just being used as a way to kind of lift that section. And as I said, seeing it in relationship to E, we treat E as the pivotal chord. Instead of seeing it as chord 1, we are now seeing it as chord 5, which lets us introduce that D major chord as chord 4. Okay, so now on to the chorus, and we are back into E major. We have F sharp minor, chord 2. We have G major, chord 4. But then we have E major, which is chord 1. And then we have B major, which is chord 5. Nice diatonic, straight ahead chord progression there, real strong harmonic pull. And as regards to the rhythm, just keeping that nice, steady rhythm going with some of those sort of choppy mutes in between the chords. I'm always pushing the chords on the downstroke as well. So before we get into the guitar solo, let's just talk a little bit about the progression, because yes, we see yet another key change. We have F sharp major, which is chord 5 of B. We have E major. That's chord 4, we then treat that as a pivotal chord to get us into the key of A major. So instead of it functioning as a 4 chord, it's now functioning as a 5 chord. And that enables us to introduce D major into the chord progression, back up to that E major. And then we go back down to our F sharp major. Back round again, E major, D major. And now we have the C sharp minor chord. Now, the C sharp minor chord is relative to both keys. It's the 6th chord of E major, and we've already seen the close relationship between C sharp minor and E major in the pre-chorus section, and it's also chord 2 of B major. I hope you didn't find that theory too heavy going, but I really feel that you need to understand the position of chords. I spoke a little bit about this in my Joe Satriani lesson from the other day, talking about harmonising the enigmatic scale. This is something that my old guitar teacher, Phil Hilborn, taught me really early on. To be able to improvise successfully, you need to understand the relationship between the notes that you're playing and the chords that are accompanying. Before I had lessons, I was just a shape player. I'd know a scale shape and, off you go. You're just moving your finger around and it's a little bit of pot luck. But if you start to understand the construction and the functionality of chords within a key, it makes it so much easier for you to improvise. And also, if you're composing, I love writing. I write all my own backing tracks that you hear here on the Six String Alliance channel. And I have so much fun exploring different scales and looking at ways of making the track sound interesting, but at the same time musical. All you're doing is treating each note of the major scale as a potential root note and forming a triad chord from each one of those notes, which gives you all of the 7 chords that you find in a key. And obviously, there are going to be chords that cross over and are relative to different keys. Okay, so now onto the solo. Yes, I've removed the capo. That is because during this song, Keith Scott tends to play it without the capo. There are lots of little lead fills throughout, some really well-placed question and answer lead fills, hence why I've taken off the capo. If that during the introduction, you have that beautiful little phrase that's based around just 4 notes, It's just so simplistic, just such beautifully placed licks that just, really create a mood. So obviously to be able to play, those lower down bends, that would be pretty hard to achieve if you had the capo at the second. Anyway, just, if you want to experiment with some licks, if you're jamming along with the track, think about F sharp minor pentatonic or the E major scale when you're playing over the verses. So now on to the guitar solo. This is one of those incredibly simplistic and memorable solos. The solo is based around a series of arpeggios that follow the chords. So we're playing basically triads here on the D, G and B string, but you start off by hammering on to the 4th. So it's like a sus4 to a major arpeggio. So we have F sharp major or F sharp sus4 to F sharp major. Using the whammy bar there for a little bit of vibrato. Then E sus4 to E major. D sus4 to D major. Back up to E major. So that first arpeggio figure continues and we see the introduction of the harmony. And the harmony is pretty straightforward. Again, it's just outlining each chord and it resolves onto the major third of the chord whilst the original harmony is resolving to the 5th of the chord. And we have this figure. That's over the F sharp major. Drop down a whole tone. Drop down another whole tone. Now, the final arpeggio is pretty interesting. Although you're still playing E major, obviously the bass guitar is playing the C sharp in the bass. We're now implying a C sharp minor. So the solo is incredibly memorable. It's really melodic, and it just goes to show that you don't have to play a lot of notes to play a great solo. Also, this solo is based around arpeggios or triad arpeggios. So for those of you that are, exploring lead guitar and have never used an arpeggio and get put off by, the mere mention of it, to think that you have to be sweep picking and tapping yourself into oblivion, you don't have to play arpeggios in that way. They're just a really musical way of outlining chord progressions. So hopefully you've enjoyed this lesson, this condensed version of Run to You by Bryan Adams. Obviously, you saw a little performance at the beginning, which is obviously a very scaled down version, just to put the parts in context. Don't worry if you find the lesson a little bit hard to follow. Click the link in the description where you can download the free tab and the Guitar Pro file. Anyway, that's it from me. Really hope you've enjoyed the lesson. If you don't already, please subscribe, and I'll see you very soon. Bye for now.